Om Ajnanatimirandasya Gyananjanashalakaya Chakshurunmilitamena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha Namo Namo Aniruddhaya Hishikeshendriyatmane Namaha Paramahamsaya Purnaya Nivritatmane Swarga Pavargadvaraya Nityam Suchi Sade Namaha Namah Hiranyaviryaya Chaturhotraya Tantave Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. Thank you for joining us. And today we will be talking about the seventh shower of nectar in Sri Madhurya Kadambini, which is the essay authored by Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur on select verses of Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, which is Srila Rupa Goswami's offering. And just until now, we covered the aspect of bhakti. We wanted to understand the nature of bhakti, which was the first shower. And then we understood the prospect of faith, Ado Shraddha. And then after which we understood Sadhu Sangha, Bhajana Kriya, and then we went on to discuss the topic of Anartha Nivritti. And after Anartha Nivritti, we graduated, because that's the graduation point into higher levels of bhakti. The anarthas have been given up, and all that remains after Anartha Nivritti is very, very subtle elements of distraction, very subtle aspects of our not being able to fully comprehend and desire Krishna consciousness. Then when we become fixed at the point of Nishtha, there's very, very high level of acceleration. In other words, after the point of being launched into the very high levels of mode of goodness, very little resistance remains in the heart of the devotee for them to be able to make real progress. They are not fighting sense gratification or impulses of sense gratification. They're not really fighting the mind. They're not fighting the senses. They're not really putting a lot of energy into simply trying to be normal. You see, the difference is that in the early stages of bhakti, even during Anartha Nivritti, the devotee is putting in an extraordinary amount of effort. Extraordinary amount of effort is being exerted simply for the purpose of becoming normally situated. In other words, very little energy goes into Krishna consciousness until we separate ourselves from anarthas. Krishna consciousness, or rather, the acceleration or investment into bhakti, does not take place fully until Nishtha. Until then, immense effort just goes in trying to be a devotee. You see? Immense effort is just being put in just trying to be normal. We are fighting all kinds of impulses. We are fighting reactions. We are fighting attractions, sense gratification, right? We get overwhelmed and bewildered by certain events in life. In fact, many people don't graduate. They simply remain in Anartha Nivritti, or rather reach the point of Anartha Nivritti, closure, and then they leave their bodies. So it's one lifetime is just in fighting or undoing the several million lifetimes worth of work of being unnatural or being situated in separation from the Lord. One entire lifetime after coming in touch with the pure devotee and coming in touch with the process of bhakti just is being invested in clearing our past reactions and reaching a point of being able to take off. So what does it mean? The devotee comes from the level of passion ignorance to the mixed modes of goodness, and then he rises higher and higher in the mode of goodness to the point where the influence of passion and ignorance becomes completely absent. And that point in itself takes a whole lifetime. That takes a whole lifetime, and in some cases, they enter into Nishtha in the subsequent lifetime, and that devotee takes very little time in the subsequent lifetime for them to begin coming in touch with the movement, and then they take off. And then you notice that the acceleration is quite rapid. It does not take the extraordinary amount of effort which others do. This devotee is just taking off. That happens because the previous lifetime has been invested in simply reaching that point of being able to take off. That is Nishtha. Nishtha is the platform which is probably, I can say, categorically, at the very, very highest level of the mode of goodness within the material sky. They have not crossed over yet, but they are at very, very high levels. As a consequence, ignorance has almost diminished to nothing, and then passion is almost gone except for some trace amounts, or rather very, very subtle amounts. As a consequence, mode of goodness is very high, and their desires are sublime. You see, they are very, very high level. Their desires are now situated in such a way that they are not fighting. They are not really sitting down to chant and then fighting the mind to focus. They are sitting down to chant and they get absorbed very easily. That is Nishtha. And then from Nishtha, if it is steady devotional service and the practice of chanting is very steady and people are able to invest a lot of time and energy in building power in their chanting process, they reach the point of developing real taste, ruchi. So we distinguished ruchi, and the way we distinguished, first Nishtha, we distinguished that by saying that the devotee would reach a point where they would recognize their group leader in the spiritual sky. Everybody has leadership in the spiritual sky. Everybody, sometimes there are leaders also in the material world who eventually come here to make, give help and connect those souls whom they are connected to in previous lifetimes or from the spiritual sky. And at the point of Nishtha, one gets connected to the guide in the spiritual sky who is supposed to show them the way to the Lord, who introduces them. Practically is someone who is like a mentor, and the mentor has the ability to take the soul and introduce him or her to the spiritual, to the Lord. Now, at the point of ruchi, when this sambandha gyan comes in, which is quite intense, at the point of ruchi, there's deep acceleration. Taste develops because now there's steady devotional service, and it's prolonged, and it is quite intense, and it goes on for many, many years, where the person is able to very steadily able to call upon the holy names with deep taste. And then when the ruchi platform comes in, the person practically is able to make very deep acceleration in a very short time period, because now there's real taste. Now there's real taste. They're able to make some very, very deep progress in a very short period of time. So from ruchi, they go on into Ashakti, which we spoke of in the previous class. And Ashakti is all about being able to develop attachment. The distinguishing factor is that in Nishtha, when the devotee is deeply engaged in sadhana, all in a sudden, let us say they would have chanted 12 deep rounds. All in a sudden, in the 13th round, in Nishtha, they would suddenly be hit by some kind of a material impulse. Or rather, they would be hit by an impulse which is not related to Krishna. And they would wonder as to where did this come from? It's almost like, where did this come from? I wasn't quite reflecting on anything related to, sense gratification or, mundane. How did this come from? The opposite happens in Ashakti. In Ashakti, even if the person is involved, apparently, externally, in activities that are mundane, they all in a sudden go into absorption into Krishna consciousness. It is the opposite in Ashakti. The attachment is so deep that even mundane environment does not influence them, and they immediately go into Krishna consciousness and start remembering the past times. They start relating a specific, experience to their experience, and so on and so forth. And it happens quite spontaneously. They themselves are not sure as to where that comes from. So the surprise in Ashakti is the opposite of the surprise in Nishtha. In Nishtha, the mundane hits by surprise. In Ashakti, Krishna's memories and so on and so forth, aspects of the spiritual sky, it hits that devotee by surprise. Now they are very, very, very close to crossing over. What does crossing over mean? Crossing over means that it is phenomenal. Our process is so phenomenal. Crossing over means we get liberated while being in this body. We get completely liberated while being in this body that is crossing over. So bhava begins just after Ashakti. They're very close. Ashakti, they're very, very close to the spiritual sky. And bhava begins just then. These are like the entrance into the spiritual sky. And all in a sudden, in bhava, the person enters into bhava and now has very deep sentiments and loving emotions towards the Lord. This particular aspect is also summarized in the Bhagavad Gita, right? We read about it right in the end, also in the 9th chapter, but in the end as well. Krishna says, Manmana bhava madbhakto, madhyaji mam namaskuru, mam eva ishyasi satyam te, pratijane priyosi me. Always think of me, become my devotee, worship me, offer your homage unto me. Thus you will come to me without fail. I promise you this because you are my very dear friend. Now, this particular statement seems quite awesome for a sadhaka who is in, let's say, anartha nivritti. Always think of me. And we start wondering, how is that possible? It's awesome. How do you always think of Krishna while being in this world and while being able to engage in this world effectively and so on and so forth? Right? When Krishna was making this statement to Arjuna in the 18th chapter, this is a very confidential statement. Why is it confidential? He was talking about Bhava Bhakti. This is Bhava Bhakti. Always think of me. Because once someone enters into Bhava, they are in touch with the spiritual sky. They are liberated. They have completely assumed the identity of who they are in the spiritual sky. And as a consequence, if they don't hide it, they will seem like mad men or women. They cannot relate to this world. Nothing of this world would hamper their consciousness. Nothing. In other words, nothing of this world can disturb them because they're already being rewarded immensely in the spiritual sky. They're not here. If their confidential bhajan or whatever they do behind closed doors while they chant and call upon the Lord, when they engage in deity worship and so on, at that time they don't hold back. But externally, they hold back. When they come into the public, they interact into the public. Right? So they have to step down. They have to step down one step for them to be able to just recognize this phenomenal world, and for them to be able to relate to phenomenon in this world, they have to be able to step down one level for them to be able to connect here. Right? And that is very important, especially since we are in a preaching movement. Very advanced devotees also are preachers. And as a consequence, they will have to understand and distinguish patterns of behavior in those whom they are trying to assist. They have to be able to spot unwanted patterns. They have to be able to spot consciousness. It's very easy for them to see that. And when they see that, they're able to assist. And as a consequence, this distinguishing factor has to be there for them to discern that something is wrong. See, for something is wrong and the discrimination to come, they have to come down and be able to see that, okay, this is this, and there's something abnormal here, and I need to assist. I need to speak this in the class, or I need to be able to address this by talking to such and such person, advising them, and so on. So this happens in Bhava, where they have to step down. In Bhava, it is Manmana bhava madbhakto, madhyajimam namaskuru, and it is natural. They are thinking about Krishna 24/7. It's very pleasurable. All in a sudden, they're thinking, I want to go back to the spiritual world. I want to touch Krishna. I want to embrace him. I want to play with him. I want to feed him. I want to, have all kinds of fun with him. Right? I want to deal with him depending on the kind of mood they are in. They're very specific that they want to relate to Krishna in a certain way. And all in a sudden, they experience that. They almost feel that they are experiencing that. They almost feel they're experiencing that. They almost do that. So they keep it hidden while they step out. But there will be great potency. How is it so? You can recognize that by understanding that such a person is able to enthuse others because they carry such potency in their hearts. The spiritual world is fully alive. They have seen things. You see? They have interacted with the Supreme Lord. Not fully, because they're still in Bhava. It is still condensing. In reality, Bhakti begins in Bhava. The beginning of Bhakti is Bhava. Until such time, we are working towards reaching there. Real bhakti begins in bhava. This is like the penultimate stage, and this is a stage where liberation is already given, and liberation becomes, what do you call it, tuchya. Liberation is rejected, almost as saying, what's the use of liberation? I have no desire for it. Why? They are not affected by anything in any case. So what is the need for them to be liberated? Mukti is not required when things don't bother anybody, right? So they are not affected in any case. They don't want liberation because they already feel they're in the spiritual sky. This is bhava. When next week or next session, which is on Thursday, when we discuss prema, this bhava graduates into prema, where this desire of wanting to come in touch with the senses of Krishna becomes really manifest while being in this body on this planet. If someone wants to embrace Krishna, they get to embrace Krishna. How is that? And in this body, I'm talking about the physical body. I'm talking about being born in a certain identity that we are in. That identity is completely given up, and we've assumed the identity of a resident of the spiritual sky, which is our true identity. And that identity now has become super real. Super real to the point where they depart from the body at will. They depart from the body at will. The body is not able to comprehend. So that's where the fainting occurs. The body is not able to comprehend what is happening. The person, the soul, departs and goes to the spiritual sky and then returns again. Right? We read about it in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, the behavior of Lord Gauranga, where all of a sudden something or the other happens and then he goes into a swoon. And at this particular stage, they're quite unmindful. You read about this unmindful variety in Srimad Bhagavatam. You read about Sri Rishabhadev. You read about Jarabharata, for instance, where they're completely unmindful of what society thinks. They're liberated from the bodily conception because they themselves have absolutely no conception that they have an identity other than what they have in the spiritual sky. At this particular stage, there are two different types of bhakti at the higher level. One is that one could relate to Krishna in Vaidhi sadhana. What does it mean? It means that Krishna assumes a superior position. He is God. That is not forgotten. That is Vaidhi. That could continue right up to the stage of bhava and even beyond. Or, because of their original position, the devotee enters into Raga Marga, where Krishna assumes a specific, in the sense the devotee assumes a specific identity of being, a resident of Raja, in Raja Bhumi, where the Aishwarya is completely covered over by sweetness, Madhurya, and as a consequence, they relate to Krishna as a friend, as a lover, as, a child, and, even as a master, but in Raja. They're not looking at him as the Lord. That particular identity of Krishna is gone. You see? It's very important. This Ragamarga, it's spontaneous. That relationship comes into being. It's almost like the devotee understands that, okay, I'm a neighbor, or rather, I'm someone who is a part of Krishna's entourage. Krishna is not God, like the cowherd boys and the cowherd girls and Mother Yashoda and Nanda Maharaj, none of whom consider Krishna to be God. They have pure love where there's absolutely no Aishwarya, it's not covered over. Shuddha Bhakti, which is the gift of Rajabhumi, that is obtained through Ragamarga. That spontaneity automatically comes in when the relationship becomes evident. That cannot be hidden, but it should be hidden from the view of others. In what sense? This kind of high level of devotion should not be displayed. Otherwise, there would be many who are neophytes who would want to mimic the advanced devotee without having really made any advancement. And as a consequence, they would be hurting themselves. They would not be working on themselves. It would endanger their progress. So as a consequence, it is best for advanced devotees, what they do is that they hide their emotions, or rather this kind of, they let loose all of this when they are, in isolation, or when they are in the company of those who can recognize and who are also of the same position. There was this god brother of Srila Prabhupada by name Akinchana Krishna Das Babaji Maharaj. And he was a very, very exalted and very, very simple-minded devotee. Simple-minded, in other words, the real definition of a simple devotee. No, absolutely no, what do you call it? Very easy to approach. He would pay obeisances to every kind of person who comes in. He would have no qualms in doing so. So when Srila Prabhupada was in Vrindavan, this Akinchana Krishnadas Babaji Maharaj used to want to meet Prabhupada because they knew each other. They're god brothers. But Akinchana Das Babaji Maharaj was quite a simple personality. He used to be in tatters. He used to wear robes which are tattered, which are inappropriate. Rather, in other words, his clothing and all that was very simple, like real sadhu. And when he used to go to meet Prabhupada in Vrindavan, in the Krishna Balaram Mandir, and even otherwise, Prabhupada's bodyguards who used to be outside, they used to think that this is someone, who wants to just meet Prabhupada. And they used to refuse him entrance. They used to say, no, he's not there, he's not available. Then one day, this Babaji Maharaj was very smart. He snuck in. When the bodyguard was turning on the other side, the devotee was not looking, the Maharaj went inside Prabhupada's room. So he went inside Prabhupada's room, and then the person who was actually standing outside Prabhupada's door looked inside, and he was astonished. The moment Prabhupada saw him, Prabhupada jumped out of his bed and paid obeisances. This devotee similarly paid obeisances. And then they sat down, and their behavior were like children. This devotee was practically able to see that their expressions, Prabhupada's face, everything else was, their whole, the demeanor and the way in which they were dealing with each other. It's almost as if they were like kids. And that was when he realized that, he was a very advanced devotee and he had made a mistake by preventing him. He had committed some offense thinking that he was protecting Srila Prabhupada. This example is being given to understand that they have the ability, because they are both advanced, they have the ability to recognize their advancement and then deal with each other. So they don't hold back when they're meeting very advanced souls. They hold back as to set an example. We read about this in the lives of even our Goswamis in Vrindavan. We read that they used to be very regular in their chanting, they used to be very regular in their sadhana, so on and so forth. While in reality, they don't need to be because they are in the liberated platform. They don't. They're already in touch with Krishna at a very deep level. They're already beyond the Viraja river. They have crossed over. Their body is here, but they have crossed over. The door has been opened. They can go whenever they want and come back. Okay? So we find that they used to behave in a manner which was quite required for demonstration purposes because they were teaching. Right? They used to be very clear. They used to chant. They used to ensure that they are doing their sadhana, they are fasting and everything in a pakka way so that others don't get wrong misconceptions or anything like that. Similarly, our Prabhupada used to demonstrate that he is chanting, and he didn't have to do that, but he used to chant. He used to observe whatever had to be observed. In other words, even though raga has come in, one still needs to behave as if they are performing Vaidhi Bhakti in front of others. Because most souls are in Anartha Nivritti. And in such a situation, it's important for them to observe and learn. We do not want them to develop misconceptions that they could act in any manner, or they could be loose with Krishna. Because one who has crossed over, he is seeing Krishna as, someone who is very familiar. He's not seeing Krishna as God. Everything becomes an obstacle. Even deity worship becomes an obstacle when one is crossed over. Why is it an obstacle? Because now all of a sudden there are so many different rules and regulations and formal behavior. So Ragamarga is very different once they cross over, when it is genuine. It's not a pretense. It is not something which is just to be pretended upon. Hmm? It is something which has to be very genuine, which comes upon one and which is given to someone. Someone receives the adhikar quite naturally when they mature in the devotional service. So there can be no imitation. So it's fascinating to see that Krishna says this in 1865, Manmanabha Madbhakto, Madhyajivam Namaskuru. You can always think of me always. So he's telling Arjuna, come to the Bhava platform. That is ultimate. He's telling him, come to the platform of Bhava. That is ultimate. Manmanabha Madbhakto, Madhyajivam Namaskuru. Always think of me. It is an incredible, awesome goal in the early stages of bhakti to always think of Krishna. But that is quite naturally, organically manifest when one reaches the platform of Bhava. So that's why one has to understand that our own Siddhanta has such extraordinary goals and extraordinary opportunity that we are very, very fortunate to even have come in touch with this. So when we start saying that one can be liberated while being in this body, right? Then what is left? Liberation is the goal which is set in their eyes of those, and for many, many lifetimes in Satya Yuga, they just sat down, they were yogis, so on and so forth. Liberation is given by the holy names, and the person is in this body, Jivan Mukta. They are alive, but they are liberated. Alive in what sense? They are in the body. The body seems to be functioning for all practical purposes, but they are liberated. They are on the liberated platform. So nothing bothers them. Life doesn't bother them. But they need to lead life. They need to become a lot more oriented towards what is important and what is not important and so on and so forth of this particular world, because they are actually teachers. They have to lead by example. So that's an imposition on them. There are those who don't lead by example, but they just let loose. We have heard about Vamsidas Babaji Maharaj in Mayapur, who just let loose. He was a Babaji. He never used to have followers. He used to just followers in the sense he was not a sannyasi, he was a Babaji, and he was a renounced order. But his behavior was not something which could be understood. Why? Because he was not hiding anything. There was some very unusual behavior. There was, we have shared this in the past, but Vamsidas Babaji Maharaj, one day he was cooking kheer for his Gopal. He used to have Gopal, and then he used to have Gaur Nitai. So there used to be some very, many unusual behavior of him with his deities. So one day, I can give you some incidents just to show you the behavior of someone who has to preach and someone who is not going to preach but is going to let loose. So this Babaji, Vamsidas Babaji Maharaj, one day, someone gifted him a gold necklace. And that gold necklace basically was put on the neck of Gopal. He had a Gopal deity. And he had this unusual relationship where he used to tell Gaur Nitai, saying, Gaur Nitai, it is your job. You better make sure that no thief comes. I want to make sure that nobody steals from here. Guard this place. He used to tell them that before he leaves. And Gaura and Nitai, they were boys, they used to be there managing things. And one day a thief came. And I think the thief stole the necklace and went away. And Babaji Maharaj, Vamsidas Babaji Maharaj was distraught. He was attached to seeing that on Gopal. He was quite distraught. So he scolded Gaur Nitai, saying this Gopal is a child. He doesn't know anything. He sits there. Why did you two allow this thief to come and rob this place? So he was chastising them. And it is said that he tied them up, both Gaur and Nitai. He tied up their legs in some kind of a long rope and he threw them into the ocean or into the river as if they were going for a swim. Okay? He used to hold the ropes. So he used to behave in such unusual manner that nobody could understand what he was doing. But he was very, very advanced because he was on the platform of being able to interact with, Krishna at a very deep level. Of course, it is said that the thief who stole, he died the next morning. because, this was a great aparad. I think he also hit Babaji Maharaj, while this was going on, and something happened at the point, and the thief died the next morning. This is a very heavy offense. There was another incident where he was wanting to cook kheer for the deities, for Gopal. He finished cooking kheer, but then in his vision, he saw that someone else had offered kheer in Vrindavan. He was in Mayapur. So someone else had offered kheer in Vrindavan. He became so angry that he started chastising Gopal, saying, "Why did you go and eat there? Why couldn't you have waited? I'm making for you," so on and so forth. So these are the kind of dealings and it was confirmed that kheer was offered on that particular day at the particular temple, to a similar deity. So he used to have this very unusual dealings with Gopal and with Gaur Nitai that for an observer, it would be very bewildering. So Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur used to advise his disciples not to go and visit Vamsidas Babaji Maharaj because they will fall down. They would judge him, and by judging him, they will fall down because he was so advanced and it was incomprehensible behavior. So in some cases, they just don't hide. In some cases, like the Goswamis, who are dealing with people, trying to guide them, our Prabhupada, his Prabhupada, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, they all were very, very careful. Toward the end, it is said that Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he claimed that his body was very ill and he stopped taking visitors for a long period of time. He used to simply shut himself in his room, so that he could focus on his bhajan. He used to claim that, his body was very weak and it was affected and, he cannot be disturbed and so on and so forth, but he was really absorbing himself in very deep bhajan. So at that stage, it's maddening, it is said. The scriptures say that it is maddening. This desire, this laulyam, this greed of wanting to interact with the Supreme Lord is maddening. The separation is maddening. And it is constant. It is 24/7. And it is natural. There's no force. So that's bhava. And that is what Krishna is talking about in 18.65. Manmanabo madbhakto madhyajimam namaskuru. So we'll stop here and we'll see if there are any questions on this topic or anything else which you think is important. Can you explain a little about shadow ecstasy which someone could experience when around highly advanced devotees? The spillover ecstasy is a situation where the devotee, the advanced devotee, has gone to the spiritual sky, or rather is connecting to Krishna in the spiritual sky. And as a consequence, the environment around such a person also manifests certain qualities of the spiritual sky. And since such a person is able to manifest such qualities of the spiritual sky around them, people around them also experience, symptoms of bhava. They experience, for example, ecstatic symptoms. They experience certain visions. They experience a very high level of bhakti. And this is shadow ecstasy because it is not their consciousness which is offering them. They are simply experiencing the consciousness of the advanced soul, and as a consequence, they are experiencing, a part of the spiritual sky. So that is shadow ecstasy. It used to happen quite commonly around Srila Prabhupada. It has happened where Srila Prabhupada, sometimes there were devotees who used to experience higher levels of consciousness. And those higher levels of consciousness, in one sense, they were beginners. So one could make a statement that they could not have qualified themselves for such. But by being around Srila Prabhupada, they used to experience that. So that is shadow ecstasy. I'll give 1 more minute and I will wait for questions, if any, and then we will call it a night. All right, so I don't see any questions, so we'll end tonight. So thank you very much. We'll meet again on Thursday, and in all probability, we'll be concluding Madhurya Kadambini on Thursday. And the following week, we'll be starting a new topic. The new topic that I have in mind is Sikshashtakam. We'll be going deeper into the prayers of Lord Chaitanya. And those prayers in themselves have different stages. So it was required that we do Madhurya Kadambini, then we understand, and then we go into Sikshashtakam. So next week we'll be starting that. Okay. This is Brajarade Mataji. Can offenses lead to anartha nivritti? I don't think I can understand the question, because offenses are as part of anartha. Offenses cannot lead. Are you asking me if offenses lead to anarthas? Yes. Offenses can cause anarthas. Freedom from offenses is the end of anartha, which is anartha nivritti. Is that what we're asking about? Can you repeat your question, probably, because I'm not clear on this? So is your question whether offenses can lead to anarthas? The answer is yes. And once anartha nivritti is complete, one becomes offenseless. Pure chanting begins in bhava. Okay? So I'll wait for your question. I'll wait for your question because I'm seeing this question which you asked: can offenses lead to anartha nivritti? Offenses cannot lead to anartha nivritti. Nivritti is to be free from anarthas. Offenses can lead to anarthas. So can you clarify if there is any? Is there a need for clarification? Okay, that's fine. We'll follow up. So thank you so much. Hare Krishna. So we'll meet on Thursday and conclude Madhurya Kadambini. And next week we begin a new topic. And we will see. I want to introduce devotees so that devotees can ask questions live rather than through the chat. So we can do it next in the next session when I start in the following week. Okay. Thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.